The weather's hot and the grub is gorgeous. Exploring the food cultures of the Caribbean tonight, a Food Unwrapped special from 8 o'clock. Time for the headlines. First though, the Channel 4 News with Cathy Newman in London and Ayshah Tull in Leeds.
The passenger jet that turned into a fireball, leaving 5 dead and hundreds scrambling to safety. Good evening. Japan was already reeling from a devastating earthquake, and the Coast Guard aircraft on the runway at Tokyo's Haneda Airport had been preparing to deliver supplies to victims of the New Year's Day disaster. Then tragedy struck again as a passenger jet coming into land collided with the stationary plane and burst into flames. 5 of the 6 people on board the smaller aircraft were killed, and nearly 400 passengers on the Japan Airlines jet fled in terror down inflatable slides minutes before the blaze engulfed the cabin. After the trauma of the last 36 hours, that escape has been described as little short of miraculous.
I heard an explosion about 10 minutes after we got off. We'd have been in trouble if we'd left even a little later. I can only say it was a miracle. We could have died.
Good evening from Leeds. When is an asylum backlog not a backlog? Critics accuse the Home Office of massaging figures to cover up a broken system. The Home Secretary has defended the government's claim that it's cleared all the older applications.
We promised to process them all. We have processed them all. And in fact, last year we processed more asylum applications in any given year since 2002.
Hamas says its deputy leader has been killed in an explosion in Beirut. Lebanon's prime minister has condemned it as a new Israeli crime aimed at dragging his country into war. And the new mysterious zombie drug Kush that's ravaging Sierra Leone, an epidemic affecting mostly young adults and is being described as the worst in Africa.
Rescuers in Japan have been struggling to reach coastal areas where many are feared trapped under collapsed buildings after the powerful earthquake on New Year's Day. At least 55 people are known to have died after the initial 7.6 magnitude earthquake, the deadliest to hit the country in 8 years, struck the Noto Peninsula in Ishikawa Prefecture. A tsunami warning for people living along hundreds of miles of coast has been lifted. But the Japanese Meteorological Agency has measured more than 200 tremors since, some marked by the red dots here, and is warning that strong aftershocks could continue for days. As rescuers battled to find survivors, there was further tragedy in the capital, Tokyo. A Coast Guard plane preparing to fly earthquake aid from Haneda Airport to Niigata collided with a Japan Airlines jet. 5 people on board the Coast Guard plane died, but everyone on the burning passenger aircraft managed to get out safely. Here's Jane Death. Michelle Robson, thanks very much for joining us. Now, Hamas says its deputy leader, Saleh al-Aruri, has been killed in an explosion in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. He was a founder of the military wing of Hamas and headed the group's West Bank operations. Lebanon's state news agency says he was one of several people killed in an Israeli drone strike on a Hamas office south of Beirut. The area is a stronghold of the group's Lebanese ally Hezbollah, whose leader has vowed to retaliate against any Israeli targeting of Palestinian officials in Lebanon. The country's caretaker prime minister condemned this strike as a new Israeli crime aimed at dragging Lebanon into war. Makaram Rabba, thank you very much for joining us. Now, here, the government has been accused of massaging the asylum numbers after claiming it's cleared the backlog of asylum claims built up before the end of June 2022. Its own figures, however, show that more than 4,500 complex applications are still awaiting a decision. Meanwhile, the overall backlog of outstanding asylum applications, old and new, is almost 100,000. Amelia Jen takes a closer look at the numbers.
Now, Russia has launched another massive missile and drone assault on Ukraine, targeting its 2 biggest cities, Kyiv and Kharkiv. 5 civilians were killed and more than 100 were injured. Russia has ramped up its air attacks over the last few days. On Monday, President Vladimir Putin vowed that the shelling of the Russian city of Belgorod, which Moscow says killed 25 people, will not go unpunished. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Porrick O'Brien reports. Now, junior doctors in England are about to stage the longest strike in NHS history, just as the health service is under strain because of winter viruses and staff sickness. They are due to walk out for 6 days from 7 a.m. tomorrow, while junior doctors in Wales will strike for 3 days from January the 15th. NHS England's National Medical Director has warned it could be one of the most difficult starts to the year the NHS has ever faced. Our North of England correspondent Claire Fallon reports. A philosophy student who used her car as a weapon to kill her fiancé last May has been convicted of murder. 23-year-old Alice Wood drove at her boyfriend Ryan Watson after an argument near their home in Cheshire. She told her trial she didn't realise he was trapped under the car when she drove 158 metres up the road, saying his death had been a tragic accident. But the jury at Cheshire Crown Court returned a guilty verdict. Now, it's so addictive, users become hooked after a single hit, then find themselves quickly trapped in a cycle of self-destruction. Kush is a mysterious new zombie drug that's ravaging Sierra Leone, an epidemic described as the worst in Africa. And amid fears the crisis could destabilise the entire nation, a shocking new twist: the use of ground-up human bones as one of the drug's cocktail of ingredients. Our Africa correspondent Jamal Osman has this special report and a warning it contains some distressing images. The president of Harvard University has resigned following a row over anti-Semitism on campus. Claudine Gay had been under mounting pressure to step down after she failed to explicitly say that calls for the genocide of Jewish people constituted bullying and harassment on campus while testifying to US Congress last month. She later apologised, but has also faced allegations of plagiarism in her academic work, which compounded calls for her removal as the head of the university. Storm Hank has been battering southern England, the Midlands and Wales with strong winds and heavy rain causing power cuts and disruption. Some rail companies are urging people not to travel unless necessary. Video footage shows scaffolding collapsing in London, narrowly missing passers-by. Amber and yellow warnings are currently in place till 9 p.m, with forecasters warning of damage to buildings and risk of injury and loss of life. Today's storm hits just a week after Storm Garrett brought flooding and travel disruption, as well as a tornado in Manchester. Staying with the weather, last year was the second warmest on record for the UK since records began, according to provisional figures from the Met Office. The hottest was 2022. The Met Office is also predicting that 2024 could see the average global temperature reach a new record of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. That's the crucial warming threshold outlined in the Paris Climate Agreement, above which the world is at increased risk of more severe climate change effects. Earlier, I spoke to the head of climate impacts at the Met Office, Professor Richard Betts, and started by asking him how significant this is. After the break, he won fans around the world with the hit series Schitt's Creek. Now, Dan Levy is back with his directorial debut, a film focusing on love, loss and friendship.
Welcome back. Now, Dan Levy is best known as the star and co-creator of the multi-Emmy award-winning TV series Schitt's Creek. His representation of LGBTQ+ characters on screen has won him huge critical acclaim and millions of fans around the world. Now Levy returns with his directorial debut Good Grief, a Netflix film which explores love, loss and friendship. Our culture correspondent Minnie Stevenson went to meet him. Tonight's main news. Hamas says 2 leaders of its armed wing, the Qassam brigades, were killed in an Israeli strike on Beirut, as well as the group's deputy leader. That is all we have time for this evening, but we're back at 7 tomorrow night. Until then, that's Channel 4 News. Good evening.
It's starting to pour. DeLonghi Bean to Cup coffee machines sponsor Weather on 4.